Tucker. I'm the State Director of the Missouri Small Business Development Centers. And on here with us, we also have Wyvetta Hamilton, who works in our office here in Columbia, as well as Sherry Noller, who's our Associate State Director and our Marketing Communications person. So today, the topic, of course, is as everyone knows, is new business model discovery and social distancing. And I'm getting tired of the phrase "the new normal," so I may change that one. So we're going to talk a lot about new business model discovery today. I like to have this session to include several examples of new business models that we've seen during COVID-19 as well as before. So with that, and two, I would appreciate if this is an interactive session. So if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask the question or make a comment, or you can simply put your question in the chat, and I'll answer or respond to your question at the end. So with that, with no further ado, we'll get going. One of the things we're going to start with today is we're going to look at the personal side of your business. A lot of times, in my experience, entrepreneurs don't consider what I'll call their personal situation. So a lot of times, we'll think about a business and how that business runs and how it impacts itself, but we don't think about it from our personal side. So I've got a couple of worksheets that we'll go through and talk about during this, and then we'll move on into the topic. We're going to talk about making difficult decisions within your business. Always we have to make difficult personal decisions in our business in terms of restructuring debt, in terms of employees, in terms of possible sale or dissolution of a business, because what has worked in the past may not work in the future going forward. I'll introduce you again. I'll show some new business model examples that we see every day, but we may not think of as business model examples. Then we'll go through something called the business model canvas, which is a 9-step component of exploring new business models or customer discovery, identifying customer segments, and topics around that. After that, we will then, bear with me just a second, then we'll go into identifying customers. And when I get to identifying customers, we're going to talk about who will buy your product or service, not who can. Too many times small businesses are great at identifying who can walk in the doors, but what we want to look at are customer segments that tell us who will walk in the door. And then we're going to test those hypotheses. Everything that we develop with a business idea, be it a new business or an existing business, is a hypothesis that we have to test through a process called customer discovery. And then we'll talk about some of those customer discovery processes through interviews and the next steps. So as we, if you'll bear with me just a second, the first thing we're going to consider, again, and let me make this a little larger so we can see it, are our personal challenges. And again, too often in my experience, we don't look at the personal side of our business. So let me change screens real quick. So as we evaluate ourselves and our business idea, we want to look at different components of our personal situation that often we don't consider. And bear with me just a second. My sheet is, okay, so here we go. So we're going to think about different perspectives. I don't know what's happening. Maybe I made it a little large. Hold on just a second. Okay, there we go. So one of the first analysis we want to do, and again, this is when we're looking at either a startup business or we're looking at a new business model or how our business may evolve going forward. We want to look at our personal financial situation. Several people that I've known over the years start a business because they lose a job or something happens in their personal situation, so that they, I'll just start a business. Financially, that is typically not a good reason to start a business. And as we go through this pandemic, a lot of our business owners and our clients have to look at what this pandemic has done to our personal financials. Many times, as many of us know, in the small companies, especially those with fewer than 10 employees, everything is tied to the personal financials of that owner. And a lot of times people will burn through their personal cash reserves, their savings, everything before they start seeking outside assistance with that business. So we really, really have to evaluate our personal finances and make decisions based on our current reality. So in all likelihood, if we don't have the personal financials to get us through this period of time, that's going to have a direct impact on our business, be it an existing business or a startup business. We also have to consider our spouse or partner or significant other or whomever may be in this situation with us, especially going forward, because as many of us know, if you've seen the reopening strategies, most states, counties, and locations are opening in phases. So if any of you have ever worked in a restaurant or managed a restaurant, you'll know that while today a restaurant in Columbia can open, I believe it's at 50%, that's often not financially or fiscally feasible for a restaurant. With many restaurants, especially in the old model of people coming in, waiting in line, coming in, sitting down, being served by a server, and then tipping and leaving, that business model may no longer work. So we really, really have to look at all of the situations that we need to explore. So again, we need to look at our residential situation, where we live, how is our business model going to impact our home, in our family or children's situation. So we look at spouse, home, and children, again, on the personal side that we don't often explore. We look at those business relations, our current and future work life, health and stress, what we want for the future. Previously, I taught a lot of entrepreneurial classes and business startup classes. And one of the first questions I asked everyone, every student was, what do you want out of this? So in this business, where do you want it to take you? What do you want from this business 10 years now, 5 years now, 20 years from now? What are your goals for this business? And then there's a blank box on this worksheet that is sort of, okay, what's important to you? So opening a business may be a short-term goal. It may be a supplement to your income. I always talk to everyone, I've started and owned and operated 3 businesses of my own, but I never really had started a business that I had to depend on. I always had what I'll call a real job, with benefits and a steady paycheck that allowed me to manage those other businesses. So we really have to look at that personal vision in our personal situation when we're talking, again, about how we're going to structure our business going forward. So let me go back to the presentation, and I apologize for this being so wonky right now. So after the personal situation, then we want to look at and possibly make what we'll call those difficult business decisions. And again, there are going to be some restructuring options. There are different types of business models to look at, and we may have to accept the fact that failure may be our only option if we can't adjust our business model to what we'll call in this example the new normal. We may have to look at failure as an option, which might be a pivot, it might be a close and a move to another type of business. But I just want to kind of go through some of these options. So these are different solutions to different business models. So first, and I'll just go through these quickly one by one. First is a debt agreement, where in one bit of advice, be it during a pandemic, any type of disaster, or just normal day-to-day activity. Anytime you're having, even in our personal lives, when we're having financial difficulty, we want to be sure that we can work our way and communicate with our debtors as well as our creditors to see if we can work through payment arrangements and agreements. So some type of a voluntary repayment schedule if we can't meet those daily commitments. The worst thing we can ever do, be it in our business or our personal life, is ignore those payments. Those payments, regardless of the situation that we have agreed to, are due on the date that we have agreed to pay them. So in the case of what's going on in the current pandemic, it's a good idea for all of our business clients, all of our business owners, to reach out to those debtors, many of whom are in the same situation, and see if you can work out a repayment plan. And then again, some type of agreement with creditors where we reconstruct the agreement for a short period of time. Now, the difficulty with this pandemic is we don't really know when it's going to end, or if it's going to end completely until there's a vaccination and a cure, or until herd immunity takes over. We could be this way for months or even years. So, we don't like to think about things like that, but we have to. Next is what we'll call fusion, which is when a company merges with a competitor or what I would call a complementary business, other players in the market. So can you, for example, merge with a company that sells something that is needed for your type of business? I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a sports equipment store. You might partner with a shoe store or with an apparel store, to create more synergies as well as more opportunities of scale to buy things less expensive. So looking sort of outside the box to see if there are other types of businesses that we can partner with. Many times it's hard for owners to accept the fact that it may be time for a change in management. There's a book by Lichtenstein and Lyons around the business pipeline. I can't recall the name of the book, the Entrepreneurial Pipeline, I think is the name of the book. I may be wrong. But at any rate, it addresses a theory that says, a business's capacity is only as great as the owner's capacity to manage that business. In other words, many times businesses will outpace the skills or the capacity of the owner. And it's time to bring in different managers or complementary managers or partners to look at how to run that business. A startup business, for example, is managed very differently than is a business with 100 employees or 1,000 employees. They may do the same thing, but they're very different skill sets. We have to look at growth in business development. Can you simply grow out of the crisis? Now, this takes a very special type of business, although there are some businesses that you may not think about that are doing very well during this pandemic. One of my neighbors, for example, owns a company that installs swimming pools. He said his business has never been greater because people, with the lack of travel and the lack of vacations, tend to spend more money on their homes and on home recreation. So his business, he says, is through the roof. He can't hire people fast enough to sell and install pools. So not all businesses are hurting. So we need to see, is there a way we can adapt our business, or does our current business model allow us to survive or even thrive in these types of issues? And then we have to start looking at some of those tough decisions about closure. Is it simply best to close a business before the debt becomes too large? Most small business owners will know what we'll call the burn rate of their business. In other words, what basic cash do they have to have daily to open the doors, or even if not to open the doors, to sustain the business in some fashion. So supplementing that with loans or outside assistance might be an option, but when do you actually have to step back and say enough is enough? And this is a personal decision that all business owners have to make. So I know what we're seeing right now sounds very negative, but we really, really have to look at the situation. And many people, much to my chagrin, are not really looking at different business models. They're just hoping this will go away. And one thing I've learned over the years in business is hope is not a business strategy. So we really, really have to think about what we can do to overcome the obstacles that are in front of us or to simply outlast them. So we have to minimize activities. Here's where it's a good time. Our SBDC folks, for example, can come in and help determine, profit margins on different revenue streams. Some services, for example, may need to be eliminated simply because they're not profitable enough to sustain the business. Some revenue streams are built around lower profit margins. Some are built around higher profit margins. But it's important to analyze those activities and minimize those of the least profitability or the least cash drain, I'll say. We won't just focus on profitability, but let's think about cash flow as well. Maybe an option just to sell the company or file bankruptcy and dissolve the organization, or file bankruptcy and receive debt relief from the creditors. So again, this is sort of a negative and not the best part of this seminar, but these are realities that we do have to think about. Okay, so what I'd like to do at this time is I'd like to find out who is with us. I think we have Vivetta and two other attendees. So we had two that didn't show up, but if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, tell me, I guess at this point, who you are, and then sort of why you're here, and you're, are you a business owner, or are you a member of a chamber? Just to tell me a little bit about yourself, if you would. So Mel, if you don't mind, would you go first?
Sure. My name is Mel Lambert, and I'm in St. Louis, and I work with entrepreneurs at the library. So I'm in a support organization.
Okay. Which library, Mel?
St. Louis County.
Okay. So you know Lynette Watson then?
I do.
Okay. All right. She works in our group. All right.
Yeah, she's great.
Okay. And are you here just to learn about new business models, or is this something you teach and carry on? Because I'm happy to share the materials with you. You can do with them as you want.
Okay.
Get entrepreneurs thinking about new business models.
Awesome.
All right. And how about you, Megan? Okay, well, we'll move on. And Megan, if you have any questions, feel free to add. I won't put you on the spot, but I just, like to find out who's in the class. Okay, so let's talk about, let's look at some existing business models. I'm going to show you a picture now of a business model of a restaurant. And this is in LaGuardia Airport in New York City. Let me get full screen. So this is a restaurant in New York City. And as we think about this, so this business model is not the result of the current pandemic, but is this restaurant's response to the increase of minimum wage to $15 an hour at the New York airport. So what this restaurant did to change their business model, to adapt to, again, to go back to restaurants, we know that margins in restaurants don't give a lot of leeway for additional expenses. So in this case, when unemployment increased, usually somewhere from around $10 to $11 to $15 an hour, that's a significant increase for a low margin business. So this is how this restaurant responded. So they eliminated all of the wait staff. And then there's an iPad at each table that shows, ads when no one's using it. But you order directly from the iPad, and you'll see there's an outlet there between the tables for charging your phone or your computer, your laptop, whatever you might have to charge. And then there's a card reader for your debit or credit card between the two stations. So instead of having dozens of employees, there were about, I want to say, a half a dozen servers that actually brought the food out. Now, all of your refills, any additional food, everything was ordered through the iPad. So the servers were really just delivering food to the tables. So they weren't, developing that relationship with the clientele. They weren't filling water glasses. They were doing the most minimal work possible to make them the most efficient from a cash flow standpoint. Okay. Now, for social distancing, if this restaurant had to create social distancing, I could see them just taking out every other iPad. So if you'll see, all of a sudden now they have this technology-based restaurant, and there's an iPad at every 6 feet there's an iPad. So it cuts down on the capacity, but again, it meets the requirements of social distancing. So these are some. This is a different way to look at a business model. The next example I really like is we think about air travel and airlines, of what will airlines do. So here's one solution that one airline has proposed. I don't know if you can see or not, but so the middle seat is flipped, and then this dark is a clear plexiglass seal that separates the passengers from one another. Okay, so it doesn't cut down on any of the space. Again, we know that airlines are operating on relatively thin margins. Full planes are very, very important. So they don't really have the option of cutting down on the material if that works. So here's a different option for air travel. So just a couple of quick examples to show you, and we'll talk about a few more. Okay, so let's talk about the main reasons that businesses don't make it. And the number one reason, and we're going to turn this on a little different tilt, because this article addresses startups, but and I'm going to put a little change on this. So the number one reason that businesses fail is because we build something that no one wants. And I hate to say that no one wants, but so I'll change that to not enough people want. Okay, so if we have all businesses have a break-even point where we have to have enough customers daily, weekly, monthly to, at a minimum, meet our expenses. Now, those expenses through this pandemic haven't changed that much. However, the way we generate revenue in many cases has changed. So now we not only have to build something that someone wants, but we have to construct it in a way that allows people to get to our product or service in a way that they're comfortable with. Now, that's a great way of saying we have to have a business model that serves the needs of our customers, not only from the product or service standpoint, but on the delivery standpoint. Okay, so a lot of businesses are opening, and I'm guessing there are segments of customers who will go into those businesses. My daughter texted me today. She lives in Southern California, and her hair salon, her hairdresser, texted her today and said they're opening next week in California. So that just made her day. Now, so here's a way they communicated with her via text. They gave her instructions of how, she has to wear gloves. They'll put a gown across her, but they gave her the requirements of what they would have to do. There'll be an enclosed area, so it's not just an open salon now. They've created some type of barrier between the clients. So we have to be very mindful of not only building what someone wants or enough people want, but how we deliver it to them as well. So a key consideration going forward. So let's think about some new business models that many of us don't think of as new business models. And the first example I love is Uber. So Uber is the largest transportation company in the world and doesn't own a single vehicle. Okay? And think of how Uber has come across in the past few years, created mainly because of a consumer dissatisfaction with taxis. with the taxi service. And we'll go through a business model canvas in a minute, and a value proposition, and sort of show you how Uber came up with the idea. Think about Amazon. Amazon began as an online bookseller. That didn't work, so they changed, several different business models, different pivots, different iterations. But the most important thing that Amazon did was when they first opened, they owned all of the inventory. So they bought and stored everything in these huge warehouses. And they still have some of those huge warehouses, but today, about 80% of what Amazon sells, Amazon doesn't touch. It comes to us now. It may be in an Amazon box, but it comes to us directly from the manufacturer or third-party distributor. So Amazon doesn't do nearly as much inventory control and management, which brings a lot of cost and liability, as they did in the beginning. Something else that Amazon did a few years ago was they created Amazon Prime. So initially, I think it's $119 now. It was $109, or it was $99, I think. But anyway, so that free 2-day shipping became sort of the norm, and really brought on, and for the first time in years, Amazon became very, very profitable. So after changing their business model to third-party suppliers and Amazon Prime, they became profitable. Peloton is an interesting business model. Whereas they sell you a premium bicycle, but the real expense and the value is on the video. So from our homes, we can attend an intense spin class. We can ride in the mountains. So they've really created an in-home experience. And I'll give you an example of what some of the cycle bars have done through this pandemic, is many of them for the membership fee. So they have these cycle bars. I'm sure you've all seen them. We go in, everyone sits shoulder to shoulder on bicycles, and there's this trainer in the front that yells at us and tells us to stand up and how to ride and spin. And we do this for an hour, and we pay to do it. And, we get in shape, we lose weight. So obviously social distancing isn't feasible for those organizations. So many of them, for the membership fee, allow the members to take the bike home, and then they do the training sessions via Zoom. So it's sort of an offshoot of the Peloton. So no longer, do they require you that you come into their facility. So they let the equipment go home with the consumer, and then they deliver the services through Zoom. Think about how Whole Foods has changed their business model by selling and delivering through Amazon. Airbnb, like Uber, Airbnb is the largest residential hospitality business in the world, owns no real estate. They generate their business model by renting and leasing other people's rooms. 1-800-Flowers changed the florist market by taking flowers online, and they send you reminders for Mother's Day, for birthdays. They send you all of those reminders and even make recommendations on what consumers can send. YouTube, we've seen several iterations of YouTube, and I like to watch YouTube because they're sort of still playing with different models right now. They have the revenue model, they have premium channels. They're trying a little bit of everything with YouTube, but the majority of their money is still made through the selling of ads. It's interesting to watch Walmart as well. Walmart, a couple of years ago developed Walmart Online, whereas most of the time they'll sell their stock for a lower price online than they do in the store. The idea is to drive consumers more to the online. Online has less liability. It often is shipped from a third-party supplier, again, not inventory that they have to hold in the store. They don't have the liability of employees. So looking at that different model, and if you see Walmart right now, for the past several months, they've been trying different business models. They have the curbside delivery. You can walk in and they'll have everything you wanted in this little locker inside the store. So they're really looking at different ways to evolve. And Walmart's under some competitive pressure now with, of course, Amazon, with some of the other, the more boutique retailers, as well as Alibaba, which is a big online retailer out of China. So Walmart is really, really having to innovate and look at different business And that's one of the things that pressures from competition will do. Think about how technology has changed the travel industry. Except usually at very high-end levels are there travel agents any longer. Everything is pretty much online, either directly with a travel company or with what I'd call a consolidator, an Expedia or a Bookit.com. Someone that sort of is an online travel agent that allows you to make those decisions based on your budget and the reviews online. And then one of my favorites, everyone thinks about the brilliance of the iPhone and Apple, but to me, the real brilliance behind their business model is their distribution system, or iTunes and the App Store. So think about how they actually distribute their products and services through iTunes and through the App Store. And think about how iTunes revolutionized the music industry. So it all but did away with all of the big record companies and allows us now to buy and oftentimes for a small monthly fee, unlimited songs, individual songs. So no longer do we have to buy that CD or that album or that cassette with 40 songs on it to get to that one or two songs we want. So iTunes not only changed the distribution for Apple, but they also revolutionized the music industry. So when we think about these, often we don't look at these types of examples as new business models, but each is a very new business model that really didn't create anything. It just changed the way customers get to the product or service. Okay. So when we're looking at new business models, and think about these business models, but as we look at our own ideas for new business models, there are three levels that we need to look at. The entry or the intake. So how do we do business with a company? Then the activity itself, and then the exit or the payment. One of the many terms I've seen lately that I just find hilarious is contactless delivery or contactless payment. So it's everything to illustrate that, hey, we're no longer touching each other. We're not shaking hands. I'm not handing you anything. We're doing this through a lack of contact. As I go through these three steps, entry, intake, activity, and exit payment, I use an example I had recently where I went to the local blood bank here and gave blood. And as I walked up to the building, and this was during the heaviest part of, for lack of a better term, the lockdown. So I walked up to the building, went to the Red Cross building on Providence here in Columbia, walked up to the door, and they had a very detailed checklist of what was going to happen to me when I went into that building. Every step, everything that where I would go, what I would do. And because of that, I felt comfortable. So the first step, they have you go in one door and there's another door. So you go in the breezeway, the other door is locked. So you bell, they come out and, with mask and gloves, they actually had a face shield, but mask and gloves. They took my temperature. Then they had hand sanitizer. So I cleaned my hands very well. And then you went in and filled out the rapid pass on the laptop. They disinfected the laptop as soon as I walked away. I had I put on gloves and they gave me a mask. I don't know if they still give you a mask. I think everyone owns masks now. But then we went back and did the questions. They took me out to the tables. It took about 3 weeks for me to get an appointment. So I thought, this is great. A lot of people are giving blood. Well, a lot of people were giving blood, but their capacity also had to go down because they had to move the tables farther apart. So their tables were probably about 10 feet apart. But I knew that going in. Again, that checklist out front told me exactly what to expect. And then there were clear directions. Of course, at the Red Cross, you don't pay, but you do go back for the juice and the refreshments. But again, going in, I knew exactly what to expect. So as a consumer, I was very comfortable. So as we're looking at business models, as we're talking to businesses, we need to be very cognizant of the consumer at our business, not just how we structure our business and our business model, but that experience from the consumer who, for the first time right now, is not overly confident with what's going on, but there's actually quite a bit or some fear involved in dealing with a business. I haven't had the courage. I'm dying to go into a Mexican restaurant, but I haven't had the courage to actually go into a closed restaurant. So I found one here that has an outdoor patio, so I'm going to go there for lunch in the next couple of days. So again, this slide is just to show some different business models and to sort of show some of the whys behind those business models. Okay, so these are the benefits that business models need to provide. So we're not just changing a business model for the sake of changing a business model, but what are the benefits behind that business model? In many cases, it might be a technical insight. So if you think about how technology has changed, think about iTunes, for example, how technology allowed for and provided for a distribution system that couldn't have existed 20 years ago or 15, I guess it could have 15 years ago, but 20 years ago, that distribution model could not have existed. There might be a market insight. Think of how iTunes, and I'll use them as an example again, changed the music industry. So they had a unique approach to an industry, to an old industry, the records and the CDs and the cassettes. Again, that market insight allowed consumers to buy only the music that they chose to buy. And it also gives them, now they have some competition from Amazon Music, but it gives them the option, gives consumers the option of only buying and listening to the specific songs they want to. Some other models might be more efficient. And remember, efficiency can be in the eye of the beholder. We have to understand what our customers want. If I go back to the example of the restaurant LaGuardia Airport, the iPads, there's very little human contact. So there's no socialization, there's no discussion. So when restaurants don't connect with a customer at that level, then the tips and the commitment tend to go down. But we don't have as many servers, so tips aren't important. But guess what? They build the tip into the bill. So there was an automatic, I want to say it was 18% tip built into every purchase. So even though I'm not being waited on by a person, I'm still paying that tip through that iPad. But because of the environment and the business model, I didn't really pay that much attention to it. We occasionally look for lower cost and new business models. I always try to help businesses not get hung up on price and lower cost. That's typically not a good model to compete on. But especially when coupled with some of these others, lower cost could be, beneficial to a business. I'll go back to the restaurant. Just because the cost to operate, especially after the technology was paid for, the costs were lower, did that necessarily translate into lower prices for the consumer? In this case, it did not. We have to think about customer pains, as we'll call them. We'll talk about a little bit more about pains in a few minutes. And those are those things that annoy customers, that customers aren't real crazy about. Is the model smaller? Is it faster? Is it simpler? And then one, and I've bolded it in here, something we sort of took for granted in the past, but is it safer? Ever thought about going into a restaurant and being very concerned with your safety, with your exposure to a virus? 3 months ago, we had very little knowledge that anything like this could happen. So new business models today must have what I'll call obvious safety. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then some other possible benefits: newness, performance, customization. Does it get the job done? Is it design? Never forget the importance of that brand status, which often brings a higher price. Again, we go back to low cost reduction, accessibility, and then convenience or usability. So anytime we're looking at different business models, these are some of the types of benefits that we want to look at. So now let's think about a business model. And I don't mean the case of who cares in the terms of who cares, but what I mean is what customers care about your business model. Again, we're going to go back and think about the entrepreneurial mindset and how entrepreneurs and business owners often take their customers for granted. So by nature, entrepreneurs are optimistic, but customers select businesses and products that solve problems in the way they want or need them to be solved. Okay, that's one of the most important sentences in this entire presentation. Customers select businesses and products that solve problems in the way they want or need it solved. Should be need them solved. I'm sorry. Okay, it's not necessarily the exact product or service. It's that I can get it in the way I want it to solve the problem that I have. Okay, it's very, very important. So we'll come back to that. So because of this, we must first discover and understand the customer. Very few business owners, in my experience, actually talk to a customer. And I know the SBDC for years, someone would come into us with a business idea. We'd say, okay, that's great. Let's flush out a little bit. Let's, look at credit. Let's look at cash, let's look at the market. And then we'd say, okay, let's write a business plan. But never did we tell them to go out and interview 25 customers, which is exactly what this process asks us to do. So it's not let's develop a business model based on what we think we know. Let's go out, identify those key customer segments, those who will buy from us. Let's ask them what their comfort level is, how they would like to deal with this. So we'll call that customer discovery a little bit later on. So until we know what we must produce and deliver to the customer, we can't successfully develop a business plan or any type of plan. So let's talk a little bit about the business model canvas. I don't know if any of you have seen this or not. It actually came out of a group of professors from Berkeley out in California as a result of a low success rate on small innovation research grants provided by the National Science Foundation. So the National Science Foundation said, hey, we've got about a 7% success rate on these SBIR grants. Business plans aren't cutting it, and we need better applicants. So there was a group of professors led by Steve Blank out at Berkeley who developed the business model canvas. And this is described in Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, it's actually in several books, but that was sort of the foundational book on the business model canvas. But what it says is, based on the scientific method, we develop a hypothesis around our concept or idea, our customers and what our customers value. Then we go out and test that hypothesis against that concept. So the model has 9 boxes addressing customer and operational factor, feasibility, and is the basis for detailed plan. So this is the canvas. We're not going to talk about all of it today. So what we are going to focus on is over here on the upper right-hand corner, you'll see value proposition. You'll see customer relationships. This is channels. Oh, you can see channels down here at the bottom. So it talks about channels. And then the customer. So we're going to ignore revenue, costs, and key resources. We're going to ignore what we'll call the feasibility side and the operational side. So we're going to focus on the customer corner. We're going to focus on who our customers are, what value we provide that customer, not what value we think. We're going to test that with our customer. And then today we're going to consider, we're going to consider customer relationships and the importance of those relationships, as well as those channels. So what channels or what mechanisms do we use to develop our product or service to our customer? Okay, so that in a nutshell is a quick study of the business model canvas. Here it is here's a blank canvas. Again, we'll talk about value propositions. We'll talk about customer segments. every individual segment should have a value proposition. Then how do you deliver that value proposition? What channel do you use to deliver that value proposition? And then tell us about the importance of the type of relationships we have. And let me use an example here of Uber. So when we think of Uber customer segments, let's break this down into specific segments. So let's think about female professional travelers. Okay, as a segment. So as a segment, we typically want at least 3 specific demographic or psychographic characteristics. So female professional travelers. So that's some type of professional career, female in what I would call is a frequent traveler. So the value proposition is going to be around convenience, safety, and then the relationships with that. As you'll notice, Uber sort of defines the relationship through their app. So today you can through the app say, hey, I want the car at this temperature. I want the driver to talk to me. I don't want the driver to talk to me. So their distribution system, now not the delivery system, but their distribution system is the app. Their delivery system is the actual vehicle. And everything that Uber does is built around safety and convenience, if you think about it. No confrontation, no type of contact that you don't choose to have. Even when you get out of the Uber, only after you exit and your ride is over are you asked if you want to leave a tip or not. So there's not that uncomfortable feeling we had with the taxi cabs. So again, I'd like to use that as an example. I use another example of a team I was on. I was with a group of professors one time who had created an online curriculum for physics. And their thought was, with this online curriculum, that students would be more interested in STEM courses, test scores would increase, and performance in STEM classes would increase. Teachers would really buy into it, and the school systems would like it because it was less expensive than the current textbooks. You could use this this app for basically $20 a year for a student versus $180 a year textbook. So we went into the customer discovery process and actually interviewed over 150 teachers. And as you start asking teachers what their problems are, and the interview process, as we learn about this, is not, hey, what do you think about this great app? It's, can you tell us about your struggles in teaching STEM to 9th grade high school students? And then we just shut up. And as we started learning, and this was the common theme of every interview we did after it was over with, was the most critical benefit of this app was, yeah, they liked the fact that it would increase participation in STEM. They liked the fact that, it would increase test scores. But the most benefit that they saw was that this app actually graded the assignments, saving them that precious time at home in the evenings on the weekends with their family. So they're not sitting at the dinner table talking to their family while grading assignments. They're not sitting up at 10, 11 o'clock at night grading assignments that they had to return the next day. So nothing that myself as the business mentor on the team or the professors saw as a key problem, that was the common problem that those professors saw that this app solved. So that's what customer discovery can do for us. We think because, we're experts in this field that we know what our consumers want. But until we get our consumers talking and start asking them about what benefits they're looking for, we don't really know. It's kind of a guess. Okay, so everything on the canvas is a hypothesis. So again, we're focusing on the customer side, the value proposition, the customer relationships, the segments, and the channels. We're not going to talk about the revenue. We're not going to get into pricing and revenue. But what I'd like to think about in our new business models are the customer relationships and the channels. If we think about it in another business model that's changed dramatically, sort of, it's more of move to accommodate technology is the banking industry. So, we still have our banks and our tellers and our drive-throughs, but the majority of the banks today have some type of online presence. And I can tell you personally, the only time I have to go into a bank is usually to get something notarized. Very seldom do I go into a bank. Everything's online and through the ATM. So that's one of the more conservative types of businesses that's really adapted their business model, again, because technology sort of required it. So again, customer segments. So who are they and why do they buy? So they're not there to support our business. We exist to solve their problems. So again, as we think about, and I can't stress the importance of understanding who our customers are, not who our customers can be, but who they are. So what segments get us to the most cash the fastest? So you got to throw the profit. Remember, we're in business to generate cash, as much cash as fast as possible. The idea is to keep, and grow customers. So this is a concept. It's a lot broader than the discussion allowed in this seminar, but it's a sales funnel. It's to get those customers, keep those customers, and then use those customers to grow our business. We see a lot today where, they'll ask us for referrals. They'll ask us, hey, tell us about your experience. Okay, if your experience was great, go here and review us. Tell your friends about us. We'll give you a 25% discount. We'll give them a 10% discount. So a lot of those tactics, help grow the customer relationship. And they're usually conducted after the product or service is delivered. Okay. So value proposition. So how do we build and deliver? We never focused on deliver until recently. A product or service that satisfies the customer's problem or need. So when we think about what's important to our customers, the first thing we have to think about are the three things that are determined. Their job. So what are they trying to do? And let's use our teachers for an example. So their jobs are, of course, they teach. They have to take attendance. They have to put on a certain appearance and develop a certain reputation in the classroom. They have to appeal to administration. They have to appeal to supervisors. So they have a lot of different jobs, and those jobs also include managing the kids and grading and returning the assignments. But the assignment part was something that we didn't really think about. So we sit down, we make a list of jobs, and then let's think about what the pains or those annoyances that our customers have. So with the teachers, obviously the biggest annoyance was the time it took them at home tonight to grade those papers, taking precious time away from their family. So that was their bigger pain. Yeah, they wanted, it was a pain that they wanted, higher test scores and more participation. But the real personal pain, this goes back to the beginning of the presentation, you think about the personal side of our customers, what's important to them and their families. And then gains or outcomes or benefits your customers want. Now, in this case, grading papers at home is something I think you'll find that most teachers just accept as something they have to do. It's part of the job. So what are outcomes and benefits? And often pains, most everyone knows their pains. Often gains are unexpected. So they may be something we want, but there's something we've sort of come to accept that it's just not going to happen. But gains are where we can really win new customers and obtain customer loyalty. So again, going back to our business model, what is a business model we can use that gives our customers some type of benefit that they might want, but they don't necessarily expect? I'll give you an example. So here's the Uber. This is the value proposition. So the little stickets in the yellow are the customer's jobs. The brown at the bottom are the pains, and then the green are the gains. What we asked in this assignment was to write at least three customer jobs, at least 2 pains, at least 2 gains. So when you think about before Uber, the jobs of a female professional traveler was to call a taxi, find a taxi, give directions, and pay. Now that sounds pretty simple, but we knew through customer satisfaction surveys and through industry reports that the taxi cab model had a lot of problems, but no one ever went to the trouble of talking to consumers and say, hey, what could we do to make your experience better? So Uber did that. So the pains that from these jobs were, they had to wait a long time for a cab. They're often overcharged. You know, how many times are we sitting in a cab? And this was, before debit and credit card were so predominant. Okay, do I have cash? What's that awkward, tip rate? How much am I going to tip them? I'm competing with other customers. Often I'm on the street, trying to hail a cab before someone next to me does. And then often the unsafe driver, because there are no real standards in what is a great cab driver. So Uber came along and learned all of these pains associated with those jobs and said, hey, we're going to make everything easy. So we're going to arrive on time. As a matter of fact, when you hail us, we give you a car immediately. We identify the driver's name and the license plate, and we tell you how long we're going to be there, how long until we're going to arrive. You can either even follow us on the app to see where we are. They have a fair price that's published before you even order the ride. You know exactly how much it's going to cost you. They're very professional. If they're not, you give them a bad ranking and they tend to disappear. So Uber drivers, as most of you may or may not know, really depend on those rankings because that really helps move them up in the chain of Uber and helps them earn more money. And then again, easy payment. We enter our payment method into the app. And then after the ride is over, when we're walking away, we get a little reminder. Hey, do we have to tip? Do we want to tip that driver? And the tip rate for Uber drivers is outstanding, in case you didn't know. So here you think of something, we look at a taxi, and no one really liked to ride in taxis, but no one really ever complained about it until Uber came along and said, hey, you know what? Let's talk to customers and let's find out what they would prefer. And with that, the world's largest transportation company started. So again, this is just an example of how we can look at an old business model that we know is flawed and develop a new business model that was so obvious, but it just didn't make sense before because we never communicated with those customers. So then we translate that into the rest of the value proposition. So we have instant booking. You have an immediately assigned driver. You have a very structured cost system. No cash. It's all through the app. It's faster, professional drivers, a rating system, and then the visual map. So these are all features that lead to these benefits right here. And this is all developed and delivered through a taxi smartphone app. And I always talk about Uber. You have Uber, you have Lyft. There are 2 or 3 ride-share companies, but Uber is the one that seems to get the most publicity. So this is just an example of how a new business model evolved. So let's think about, let's go back to those segments. So with any business, startup or existing, especially as we're looking at a different model in this pandemic, we need to build our customer profile, our customer archetype. And this is what most of the customers, or what the most profitable segment of customers appear to be in our business. Is it male, female, college educated, at a certain income level? Is brand important? Is price important? So we have to really understand that. Most businesses do this through customer surveys. Most business owners have a gut of who this might be, but they may or may not document it. But we really need to understand who that customer is, who is most likely to walk in the door and trust us with a product or service and and have the confidence to pay us hard-earned cash for that product or service. Customers are people. We don't look at hospitals. A hospital is not a customer. There's someone in that hospital or in that business, in that school, making a decision. It may vary based on businesses. In the curriculum, the science curriculum I told you about, we learned, so our customer segments were, our three top segments were homeschool, private schools, and public schools. We eventually sold because of the size of the market on the public schools. But we found quickly that based on the size and resources of the public school, determined the buyer's model for textbooks or curriculum in our case. Larger school systems often had a curriculum buyer or some type of board that received input from teachers, but seldom did teachers make the actual decision. So there was some type of curriculum or buying group that bought curriculum or textbooks. And another one, the teachers simply formed a group. So all of the science teachers would get together and say, hey, we'll buy this textbook, or this textbook. And then what we found was the most effective model, the size for this type of curriculum were the school systems that had a superintendent that made those decisions. So now we have a sole point of contact, and we can understand through questioning and interviews what motivates him or her, and then go back and best determine how we might influence this person to make a buying decision. We'll have to talk to different types of customers. We'll talk to users, buyers, influencers, saboteurs. A lot of times we just look at customers as customers, but I always like the example, and this is not to relate to the teachers or any other example, but when you're selling dog food, who is the customer? The dog is the end user, but the dog has no money, and has very little influence in the buying process. So who is that customer? It's that dog owner. And we need to understand their motivations, their demographics, their psychographics. We can often get that based on where they live, their lifestyle. Talking about Melvin, the St. Louis Public Library. Libraries are great places of research for issues around the demographics and psychographics of customers. But again, understanding those different types of customers, and then what are those customers' jobs, pains, and what gains do they seek, or what gains do they not expect? We only find that out by talking to customers. Some of the different segmentation variables we might look at, I won't go through these, but there are demographic variables, geographic variables, behavioristic variables, and then psychographic variables. And just for fun, I'll give you there's a fun free website called mybestsegments.com. And it's all one word, mybestsegments.com. It's by the Gallup Foundation. It's a site called Claritas. And you can do a free zip code entry, and it'll give you some fun psychographics around zip codes that I think you'll have fun with. And it segments customers by specific psychographics. Okay, so it's a good site. Okay, so some of the context around psychographics, demographics, geographic, behavioristic. Okay, so we want to again list those segments: who will buy, not who can buy. Prioritize those segments. I like to prioritize segments. Again, I'm a pure capitalist. I like to prioritize by the distance from cash. So if I have a business or a startup, I want to get to the most cash as quickly as possible. That may mean, we'll hear a lot of small businesses say, hey, I don't want to eliminate anyone. Well, you're not eliminating anyone. What we're doing is we're prioritizing. So again, we're getting to those segments, excuse me, that will give us the highest likelihood of success in our business. We'll prioritize those segments. Again, my criteria is distance from cash. And then we'll typically prioritize no more than 2 best first segments. Okay, now remember, we'll take anyone that walks in the door. That's not anything we need to say or talk about. As a matter of fact, it can hurt our credibility when we start talking in those terms. I'll say, who's your customer? Oh, anyone. Okay, that kind of, we just wasted some time. You don't need to say that. Anyone who comes in the door, yes, we'll take their money, but who is going to come in that door? Who is most likely to come in? That's when we start looking at real value. And then, is my hypothesis right? Do the customer segments I've identified value what I'm trying to sell? In our curriculum model, we were trying to sell higher participation, higher test scores. And while the customers valued that, they didn't value it enough to change their behavior. Okay, and often, we'll always talk about competitors and how do we overcome competitors. But the true key to business success is to changing your consumers' behavior. Oftentimes, that behavior may be doing nothing. It may be the status quo. I thought it was interesting, when we start talking about the difference between a $180 textbook versus a $20 a year app for this science curriculum. The teachers came, or the buyer, actually, the superintendent in this case, came back, and he did agree to pilot a couple of the schools. Came back and says, yeah, it is a lot cheaper looking year by year. He said, but the thing about a physics test book or a science test book, we'll use those 8, 10, 12 years. So, because science doesn't really change that much, they'll update or revise a textbook every few years, but so that's not an annual cost. That's over sometimes 8 to 12 years that we replace those textbooks. So it's, again, something else we didn't know until we started talking to our customers. But we did find out that the value proposition was the time it would save the teachers, which made them total advocates for our curriculum within whatever buying channel they had, with the superintendent, the curriculum buyer, or the teacher's board. The teachers saw enough benefit in that time saving with their family that was the value that they put on the idea. So again, it's an iterative process. We hypothesize, we guess, then we experiment. We ask our customers, and we don't ask them, hey, what do you think of this idea? You get them talking about their problems. So back to Uber, okay, what problems do you have working with a taxi cab company? Long waits, it's expensive, I never know what to expect. I hate the tipping, I never know, where we're going. I don't know the route. I don't know when they're going to be here. So all of these pains and jobs that these people had to do. And then we listen, watch, and analyze. And then we adjust, pivot, and hypothesize, again, based on our learning. So, that's to say, okay, now we've talked to a customer. This is what we hear. Let's try this. But we have to go back and do this process again and again and again until we become those the supplier that customer will not change. So here's some considerations that are brought on really by the current pandemic. So we have to think again about food product safety. Not only the safety of the food or product, but in the delivery of the product or service. People want to see obvious, evident steps taken for cleanliness. Okay, they want to see spraying down the tables. I was watching earlier. I was watching I don't know if the SpaceX is going to take off today or not, but they were going out onto this pier where people were going to be watching the liftoff. And, as they were doing it, someone was coming up with this spray mechanism that was spraying down and disinfecting all the tables. So people today want to see that cleanliness. It has to be easy to do business. I go back to the Red Cross. That could have been a very awkward interaction, but because of the instructions they gave me before I went into the building, and there was also a phone call or a phone number said, you know what, if you're not comfortable, just give us a call and we'll reschedule you, or we'll answer your questions. So I felt confident it was easy to do. We have to look at the evident and obvious employee and customer health monitoring, personal hygiene. I think having her temperature taken is going to be a way of life for many months. I think wearing masks and gloves may be a way of life for many months. So again, in our new business models, we have to consider these not only for ourselves and our employees, but for our customers. And then there's a ever-present social distancing. The importance of social distancing, again, is that going to change? I don't know. But we have to build business models around that. You know, I see some benefit in this as I like to travel. Both my kids live out on the West Coast, so I like to fly on the West Coast. Well, I know I'm not getting any taller, but that seat in front of me is getting closer to my knees every time. So now that we have to social distance, I'm anticipating we'll have more space on the airplane. I don't know. I'll let you know. I'm trying to go in mid-June. But social distancing is something we always have to consider. And I'll think about, you know, many of you, and well, everyone on this call is from Missouri, but think of the press we got over the weekend for the party down at Lake of the Ozarks. That changed a lot of business decisions for people over the next several days because of that perception that those in Missouri may not be concerned with social distancing. So there were a lot of different businesses that were supposed to open this week may have delayed that a little bit. I know my church put its opening off for a few more weeks until they kind of figured some of this stuff out. So, social distancing is something that we really, really got to look at, and we've got to find a way to make it acceptable. Some additional considerations. If someone's sick, they don't come to work. And it's that simple. You know, there are days when you have a cold, you go in and you work through it and you make it. It's probably not going to be acceptable anymore. And as a business owner, we have to be really aware of our employees and the customers in the building. Strict hand washing practices, again, that obvious evident cleanliness, strong procedures and practices to clean and sanitize, and ensuring someone in charge is on site at all times during operating hours. This may not always be an issue, but in this uncertain time when our customers have the least confidence they've probably ever had coming into a business, it's important that someone of authority be there to answer those questions and allay those concerns that they may have. So we have to think about, through all of this, the ease of doing business. We think about processes, payment, technology, employees. Again, what processes do we have? How evident are those processes? More important now, online payments, cash payments are probably not going to be as acceptable. I took my dog to the vet the other day, and they have what they call a pause-only policy. So you get there, you call them, they come out, get the animal, we take the dog in, I stay in the car. They call me and say, okay, here's what we're going to do, here's what it's going to cost, can we have your credit card number? So I give them my credit card number, so everything happens. They bring the dog back out on the leash. The employee has the gloves, I have my gloves on, and we make the transfer. So again, it was contactless transfer, very easy. So they had the processes, and again, they gave me those processes up front. They called me and told me what to expect, what was going to happen. And then the payment, of course, we use technology through the apps. Think about what a boon this is going to be for technology and app development. Everyone's going to have an app now. And then how do we communicate with employees? Many restaurants, we've seen employees turn from wait staff to, taking food out to the curbside or even home delivery. So they've changed those models. And then let's think about some new models. So some of these are pretty difficult. Some are not so difficult, but think about a new model for a daycare. And that's a tough one. The only benefit to that is that children seem to be more immune than the elderly and more resistant to the illness. So again, other than the obvious cleanliness and cleanliness practices, I would imagine like the vet's office, we won't be taking our children into the daycare any longer. They'll be coming up to get them, or like at the Red Cross, we'll put them inside a door, and then someone will open the door, take their temperature, and then take them into the building. So So just looking at those different business models, a lot of these, it's hard to really change the business model. We can adapt it to account for the cleanliness and the safety. But, at this point, a daycare or a business that requires contact, a barber salon, a masseuse, it's very difficult to change how we deliver the product or service. So we have to do it in a way, and again, here's where the importance of understanding those customers that really want our product or service are going to find a way to come, or going to find a way to get to us. So just trying to build something around everyone isn't going to be feasible. We want to build our processes around those who really want to come in to see us. I use the example of my daughter and her hair salon. I don't think she cares what type of processes they have as long as she can get in the door at this point. Convenience stores. I've been in convenience stores that have, before we've seen the security windows where everything goes through a tray. I can now see those being a great option for for COVID-19 and for the safety, during the current pandemic. I was at the Columbia Post Office the other day, and they made these PVC frames with big plexiglass sheets hanging from these frames between the customer and the postal worker. Retail gift shops, we'll see more online sales. We'll see more delivery. I saw a model for a business the other day that had, it was like post office box out front of the building. So you made a purchase, you paid online, and you went down to the local store. And when you paid online, they gave you a number, and then that number was that numbered box was it was the item you bought. They gave you the number of the box, and then it was a 2-digit combination. But again, it's just a way to create that contactless delivery. But again, as we look at different business models, it's not important to look at what others are doing. It's to look at the customers that we know and consider that early intake, that activity, and then the exit. Think about those 3 steps as very, very important processes. And in entry intake, the clarity before the entry intake is very, very important. Okay. Any questions? I know we cover a lot of material, but I do like to open this up for questions if you might have any. And Megan, I understand you don't have any volume, so if you want to ask in the chat, that's fine. And so Mel says, you talk to your small businesses about some of these changes being permanent? Yeah, we do, actually, Mel, because, some of these, let's say there is a change, the pandemic, there's a virus or there's a vaccination. If some of these business models are more efficient, then it might be a better way, to deliver in the future. So if we can find a way to really maximize our margins or lower our costs. And let's face it, we hate to think about employees losing their jobs. Excuse me, but that is often an impact that technology has. Now, I don't like to look at it as employee losing jobs necessarily. They have other opportunities, to innovate or create opportunities for themselves. But it can be difficult. But yeah, I do specifically address some of those changes as possibly being permanent. Okay, Megan dropped off. Okay. So Mel, anything else?
No, that was really great. Thank you.
I'm sorry we have to rush through it, but
Oh no, that's okay. It's a good presentation.
and the idea is just to get you thinking, just
Yeah.
different business models out there. So anything we can do, any questions we have, just let us know. And if you will send me your email.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I'd be happy to send you these slides if you want them.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much.